All right. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to Wisdom and Wanderlust. My name is Michael Bennett, co-founder of ExplorerX, and as always, I'm joined today by my friends and colleagues, Robin and Amanda, two of our expert travel designers. On behalf of the entire ExplorerX team around the world, we want to thank you for being with us today. We are super pumped. We always are, I always say I'm super excited for these generally because we are. But today's a really special Wisdom and Wanderlust for us. We have our very good friend Luca Jakoboilu with us today from Greenland. She's coming to us from Copenhagen, but she has spent quite a bit of time in Greenland, and we'll be talking a lot about Greenland today. And, at a personal note, Greenland's a destination that has been really influential, powerful, life-changing for me. So I can share more about that once we get into the conversation, but this is one that I am particularly looking forward to. So before we jump into the conversation, just a few quick reminders. If you are new to our community, you can learn more about who we are, what we do, what makes us so special by visiting our website, which is www.explorer-x.com. Of course, we always love talking to our travelers and future travelers. So if you are interested in reaching out just to say hello, connect with us, learn more, get any information about future travel with ExplorerX, send us an email to either travel@explorer-x.com or hello@explorer-x.com. And be sure to follow us on social media for all the latest and greatest at GoExplorerX.
I also have a few little housekeeping items for everyone. We're going to keep this as close to an hour as possible. As Michael said, we are recording this and it will be available afterward. We'll email everyone a link. And if you have any questions as we go along, use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen and we'll answer questions as we go through the conversation today.
Awesome. Thanks, Amanda. So one of the things that we're going to be talking a lot about today with Luca is the fact that the people of Greenland are known as the pioneering people. And that sort of led to this question of, as we discussed and thought about the question of the week that we wanted to tackle before we got started today is, who are some of the people that we've met throughout our travels that have made a lasting impact on our lives and on our travels? We've talked a lot over the past few weeks about, activities that we've done or experiences that we've had or crazy foods that we've eaten, but this is a really fun opportunity for us to kind of talk a little bit about some of the people who have impacted us deeply through our travels. So with that, again, Robin and Amanda, our question of the week is, who is someone that you've met while traveling that has left a lasting impact on you? And Amanda, I'm going to throw it at you first.
Sure. I've met so many amazing people along the way, but one of the most impactful for me and really what kind of got me really deeply affected by travel was my first trip to Africa. And we visited a village near Arusha that doesn't get tourist visitors. And just walking with the children who were so incredibly excited to see us. They had so little and were so happy. Their soccer balls were made of plastic bags all knotted together. And it was my first experience of really seeing. I've been very fortunate and privileged in my life and to see how little they have, but see how happy they were and happy to see us, who they don't see tourists. They were excited to hold my hand, and they kept rubbing my arm with their face and everything, almost as if to see if I was real. And it was just such an impactful experience, just walking with them. And they were so excited to show us their village and show us where they go to school and all of that. And it was a deeply impactful experience for me and made me want to learn more and experience more of their culture and visiting other cultures after that. So it was really impactful for me.
Did you say that was your first?
It was my first trip to Africa.
First trip to Africa.
Yeah, and it was my first day. Really, I had arrived late the night before and hadn't really seen anything, so it was my first real experience with Africa and with international travel outside of. I'd only really ever been to Australia and New Zealand before that, which they speak English and it's
right.
a little nearer
Culturally
to home.
similar. Yeah.
More culturally similar. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Yeah.
Wow. Awesome. Robin, what about you?
Yeah, Amanda, it's interesting that to hear you say that, because the first thing that comes to my mind is my first trip to Africa as well. I was traveling by myself, so it gave me lots of time to really get to know my guides and the people who live there. And the first real friendship I struck up from somebody from a totally different world than mine, Mikey, I still keep in touch with today. He was the guide out there, and we really got to know each other pretty well. And it was so interesting just to share stories about like how we grew up and the differences, and we were so curious about each other's lives, and we still keep in touch to this day. And so I would say that's yeah, Mikey is somebody who's left a lasting impact and really like struck my curiosity about the rest of the world. And yeah,
It's always it's always great when we make these connections, and then I think oftentimes, more often than not, we connect with people and they're there for a brief period of time, and then we move on and everyone goes about their lives. But it's always fun when you can connect with somebody and like,
yeah,
they stay a part of your life, right? They're part of your story.
yeah, yep. We're
Yeah.
still on WhatsApp, and
Right.
yeah,
Right.
it's very cool.
Yeah. And I'll say my person is actually my friend Gianna, and I don't think she's on here today. But we've been working with her, and she's actually going to be one of our family travel coaches. But my first international travel experience was to Costa Rica. I've shared the story, right? I got hit by a car and blah, 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 and all that stuff. But it wasn't the local people that I met there. It was actually, having a chance to sit down and meeting Gianna and having someone to really sort of dive into the meaningful conversations. Like, she was like the sounding board. Like, we sat down, for hours at a time talking about what we were experiencing and what we were learning and all of that. And that was really one, because it was my first international travel experience, having anyone to connect with, to sort of soften that like initial shock of being in a different culture, right? So especially someone from your own culture was helpful for me. But then actually being able to get into like really good, deep, meaningful conversations about life, about school, about cultures, about all that stuff. Like, I'll never forget like some of the conversations that we had just sitting on the balcony, in Manuel Antonio, just talking about life and dreams and visions and all this other stuff. And so, and again, like much like you, Robin, and Mikey, like we're still friends. And as I said, Gianna's going to be working with us. And so, and she's actually writing a couple blog posts for us as well. So, anyway, super powerful. But, and Amanda, as you said, I mean, the number of people that have made an impact on us through travels is innumerable, right? And people that we don't even remember their names, we don't remember. I mean, even subtle little things that we had a brief interaction with somebody at the coffee shop, and that can trigger something in us that leaves a lasting impact, and we don't even remember that at all. So
Yeah, the great thing about travel.
It is the great thing about
all the people you meet along the way.
Exactly. So cool. All right, guys, thanks. So we're gonna move on to the sort of the heart of this conversation now, and dive into our conversation with Luca and our conversation about Greenland. As I mentioned sort of at the very beginning, Greenland is a destination I've had the opportunity to travel to twice. It's left a lasting impact on me for sure. It's a bit like a unicorn these days, right? It's this remote destination that is naturally beautiful. It's got incredible people, incredible warmth of the people and the culture, dramatic landscapes, and yet it's sort of untouched in many ways. And so it's sort of what most of us travelers are really looking for. And so anyway, so I'm continually pumped about Greenland. We do our best to send as many travelers there as possible. We're looking at doing a small group journey there in 2022. So it's a destination that we're really excited about. And Luca is one of our team members there in Greenland. And although, again, as I mentioned, she's based in Copenhagen, but she works and designs all of our travel in Greenland. Luca grew up in Denmark, but moved to Greenland at the age of 19. She has Greenlandic roots on her mother's side, so really kept a strong connection to the culture and the people and the heritage of the Greenlandic people, even when she was growing up in Denmark. After working a series of jobs, finishing her education, she ended up moving back to Copenhagen, but started working for the Visit Greenland Tourism Board and spent over 20 years there, really developing her expertise of the travel industry, of Greenland in general, and really how to design creative, immersive, culturally authentic travel experiences to Greenland. So as I said, now we have the awesome opportunity to work with her on a regular basis as we plan travel for our folks to Greenland. So Luca, welcome, and thanks for being here today.
Thank you so much, Michael. I'm happy to be here.
We're pumped to have you. So you're in Copenhagen now. How are things in Copenhagen? How's life for you these days?
Things are good in Copenhagen. Of course, we are all affected by the COVID-19, and here the numbers are going up, so it's not so good. So we're getting some restrictions again, and Greenland is even more strict in their rules. So it means that for us this year, Greenland has been totally out of the question for all our clients. Nobody could go, except from people from Denmark, only at a certain point. So, but apart from that, things are good in Copenhagen. Yeah.
Good. And what are you doing to stay connected to all of the relationships, friends, and network that you've built in Greenland since you're not there right now?
Well, the good thing is that it's a very modern country and everybody has a computer, so we're all on Facebook in Greenland.
Yeah.
So I keep in touch with people and I read the news online, and so it is possible to keep up with things, I think.
Yeah. Well, lots of questions for you, lots to jump into. Let's start with this. Where did this sort of an obvious answer here, but I want to ask it anyway. Where did your sense of wanderlust come from?
Mm-hmm. Well, you mentioned before that I was brought up in Denmark, but my mom came from Greenland, and she came when she was only 16 years old. Met my dad, had me at 19. They're still together, by the way. But when I was growing up, it was very expensive to go to Greenland, so we didn't go very often. Actually, I was only there when I was a baby. And then we went as a family in 82. I was 12 years at the time. And it was the first time that I met my family in Greenland. I've met them in Denmark. They had been visiting us, but we hadn't been back to see them. And that trip was just amazing. We went, as you do in Greenland, out on the fishing boat, because that was what my family had, my grandfather and my grandmother. And we went fishing and we went camping, and there were lots of mosquitoes, but it was a lot of fun. Yeah. So that was kind of the first time I went to Greenland. And then
you were 12, you said?
I was 12, yeah.
You were 12. Where did your grandparents live?
They lived in Asiat, in the Disco Bay on the west coast of Greenland, yeah. Well, then we came back, and I went there again in 87 because my grandfather passed away. So we went there to spend Christmas with my grandmother. So we didn't do a lot of trips when I was growing up, but then I started to work. Well, I went to Greenland myself, and I was, as you told, and I was there for 8 years, and I came back to Copenhagen, and I worked for the tourist board, and that gave me the opportunity to do a lot of travel for them in Greenland, but also abroad. And when I'd been there for 2 years, I went to New York. It was actually an incentive that we got because we had worked really hard that year for it was a celebration of Leif Erikson. It was 1,000 years, that was in 2000, that he discovered America. So actually before Columbus. So,
right.
So I went to New York, and I happened to meet my husband, today husband, he wasn't husband then. And he has Turkish roots. So that means that we have Turkish, Greenlandic, Danish roots, and that means that, of course, we often travel to those countries because you want to keep the relations with the family, but we also love to travel to new destinations as a family. But I think the wanderlust I have passed on, or we have passed on to our daughters, which is the most amazing thing. And they have other opportunities today that we didn't have back then.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would imagine there's a pretty strong relationship between, you know, this idea and the concept of the pioneering people of Greenland and the sense of wanderlust, right? Whether it's by necessity or not. But I want to step back because you mentioned something when you moved officially to Greenland when you were, you know, 19. What was it like living there? What did you experience? What surprised you after coming from Denmark? Like, what was that experience like for you?
Well, first of all, because I have dark hair and, you know, dark features, everybody thought that I spoke Greenlandic, but I didn't learn as a child. So everybody would speak Greenlandic to me. And I moved to this small place in the southern part of Greenland just because my aunt happened to be there at the time. She was the director of a small fur company. So I didn't go to the region where my family is actually from. And this is this really small place. And back then, there were about 2,000 people living there in the southern part of Greenland. I felt quickly at home, actually. I learned a lot of Greenlandic the first 2 years when I lived there in that little town, because it was, everybody spoke Greenlandic to me. And even though they all understand Danish, I would try to learn and talk back to them. And then after 3 years in South Greenland, I was another year in South Greenland when I started my education. I moved up to Nuuk and everybody spoke very good Danish. So I kind of gave up speaking Greenlandic. I only did that with my relatives that were stubborn and continued speaking Greenlandic to me. But coming to a small place like that, I think that it was the isolation, the remoteness, that you feel so small in the nature. And I think that was what really drew me to the place, you know, the nature. And it's just out there. I mean, it's just there, just outside your doorstep. You don't have to walk far and you see the northern lights, or you walk in the outskirts of town. You can go into the mountains, and yeah, it was so different from what I came from. But also the people, because people are very friendly and open-minded, and I just felt a part of it. And even today when I meet young people from South Greenland, they remember me, and like they will say that I'm from South Greenland even though I'm not. It's so funny. Yeah.
That sense of I don't know, vastness and isolation or just sort of, I don't know, it's hard to describe, is it's tangible. I mean, it hits you like a ton of bricks when you get there. And though, as you said, I mean, Nuuk is a modern city, and there's a lot of the modern conveniences there. Like, it's still remote. It's still, you know, it's still challenging in a lot of ways, right? And it definitely for me, it was just like it's like getting splashed with cold water, right? You just like take a deep breath and you're like, wow, like this is like, you know, your body just feels it, senses it. It's just so different there than it is anywhere else that I've been.
Yeah, and it makes me extremely proud of my heritage to think that people have been able to survive in this environment for 4,000 years. That the Vikings were there, or the Norsemen as they were called, but they disappeared probably because they couldn't grow the land, and that was the way for them to survive. Whereas Greenlanders have adapted, and I think are still good at adapting. And I think that's also why the whole pioneering thing is that it attracts people that are curious and want to see something else, from the Vikings to the polar explorers to the whalers, and then up from Greenland became a colony. You know, the workers from Denmark that came, and still even to this day, people that sometimes just come as visitors and fall in love with the country and come back to stay. So we have actually kind of few or different nationalities in Greenland.
Sure.
A lot of them working in tourism, but also in, like, we have a lot of Thai people. Quite funny.
Right. There's a great Thai restaurant in Nuuk.
Yeah. Okay, there is.
So, I mean, what you're saying I know Sarah Woodall was one of them that, you know, she came over from Washington, D.C. I think she was working in travel and just spent some time there on holiday, and then like fell in love with the destination and moved over there, and as an example. But I want to step back, because there's a lot to get into here, but I want to sort of set the foundation here. I'm guessing most people know a bit about Greenland, but maybe you can just sort of quickly walk us through some of the highlights, you know, sort of where it is and different regions and some of those things, just to kind of set the stage for the rest of the conversation.
Yeah, well, it's a huge country. So it's 2,500 kilometers from south to north. I don't know what that is in miles, but
1,600 miles.
Yeah, and then there is this small population that fits into a medium-sized football stadium. The population is 56,000, but it's all the towns and settlements are scattered around, especially the west coast, but also the east coast and up north. So it means that Nuuk is by far the biggest place, with, I think now, about 18,000 inhabitants. And then the next largest is Sisimiut with 6,000. So it just means that we have a lot of small communities, and the infrastructure is very challenging. So because we have no roads connecting the towns, of course, within the towns and settlements, we have cars, so you can go by car, but it's more common that everybody has a boat, because that's more useful to get out and around. But it's not like you take the boat to go to work, because the next town is maybe, if you're lucky, it's only 2 hours away, but it's mostly more than that. Right. So, but to get into Greenland, there are actually only 2 airlines, and you can only travel either from Iceland or from Copenhagen. Right now, there are no flights from Iceland, so all that has been closed for this year at least. But you can fly from Copenhagen all year. And we have kind of 2 main seasons in Greenland. Summer, of course, which is June, July, August, and September. And then we have the winter, which is February, March, April, depending on where. Actually, on the East Coast, you can go in May as well and still have snow. So their transition from winter to summer is like a week or something. And all.
Do you get the midnight sun throughout the entire country, or just the northernmost parts of it?
No, we have midnight sun all over.
All over?
But,
okay.
Yeah, but actually it's north of the polar circle.
Sure.
So there are some hours in the south where it's dark, but it's like very short. So yeah, it's long days in the summer.
But beautiful, right? I mean, it doesn't get much above 20 degrees, right?
Yeah, it's. I think I have a theory that you have to be there in the summer to be able to be there in the winter when you have the polar nights, when it's completely dark. Or you have to get all the sun in the summer, and then you have to go like the bear, just enjoy and relax and not do too much in the winter. Yeah. Otherwise you get a little crazy. But then you have the northern lights. Actually, I feel like when I lived in Greenland for 8 years and then came back to Denmark, I felt it was much darker here because we don't have snow, or rarely snow. And the snow makes it more light. And also we have the northern lights. And also the weather in Denmark is like more rainy, whereas when we have precipitation in Greenland, it's snow. So I thought it was harder to be here in the winter than actually to be in Greenland in the winter. Yeah.
Interesting.
And then the period is quite short because already from February, so actually if you're in Ilulissat, which is north of the polar circle, about 1 hour flying time, then the sun rises above the horizon on the 13th of January. And it's actually something that we celebrate. So everybody goes up on the top of the mountain to greet the sun when it comes for the first time. And from there, it really grows. So in May, we have midnight sun. So in 3 months, the days are growing very long.
You mentioned the Northern Lights. So the Northern Lights viewing best from like what, mid-September through April?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, I remember the first time I had a chance to go to Greenland was for a conference back in 2017. It was in September, and we were lucky enough to see them then. And I remember everybody from the conference running out to the, at 3 a.m, I think it was, just staring up and sitting outside. And it was just, what an awesome experience. But you're right, because it was really nice then. The weather was great. And then I had a chance to go back in February of 2018, where there's 3.5 hours of daylight, and it's, the average temperature is, below freezing, obviously, and, 2 feet of snow and blowing winds. And it gave me a sense of appreciation for the differences, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So what are some of the you mentioned a little bit of this, but what are some of the more popular places for people to travel, and what are your favorite places to design travel for folks?
Yeah, I have several favorite places. I'll say Nuuk, not only because it's where I have my friends and family, but also because I really appreciate the contrast of Nuuk. Like, you have the culture in the town, you can go out to a restaurant and so on, and then the contrast is this huge fjord system, which is actually the second biggest fjord system in the world, where you go on weekends, you can go hiking, and all the stuff you do. I really, really love Nuuk. But I have spent most of my vacations with my family in the south, in a tiny settlement called Ialigo. And it's only 25 minutes by boat from the nearest airport. But there's only about 25 people living there.
Wow.
And they are sheep farmers, and there are actually cabins there, so you can go there as a visitor. But we know people there, so we borrow a house, which is completely without running water, without electricity, very, very basic. We have to go and get water. We can cook on a stove, which is on gas. And there's a refrigerator running on gas. And we really like the slow pace in a settlement like that. The shop is open for 2 hours in the morning and 2 hours in the afternoon. So that is the highlight of the day, to go down to the shop and see what they have in the freezer. What are we gonna have for dinner tonight?
Right,
if we don't catch a fish or whatever we do. And then I think the Disco Bay, where my family is from, and of course Ilulissat, which has the ice fjord there with the amazing, enormous icebergs and humpback whales, is a place to go, and where I send most of my clients, actually, that don't want to roughen it as I do when I go.
Yeah, right. You're talking about the accommodations in the south. It sounds like what we would call glamping here, right? Like,
yeah, right.
Very, very basic, but certainly enough. And it sounds awesome. How long? knowing that most folks, especially those from North America, don't have tons of holiday time, again, in normal times when people can travel. So caveats apply. What is your recommended amount of time? Like if I said somebody that really wants to come and visit Greenland, and really sort of immerse themselves. What is 2 weeks enough? Is 3 weeks enough? Like, what do you recommend?
I think 2 weeks is good, but it depends on where you go. So if you go to South Greenland, you can easily spend 2 weeks there because the towns and settlements are not that far from each other compared to the rest of the country, which means that you can actually cover quite a lot of the area in 2 weeks. You would be there for a week, and then you've seen everything in town, and you've been into the fjord. So it depends on if you just want to, immerse yourself in nature and be in the fjord for a week. You can of course do that as well, and then you can easily spend 2 weeks there. But the same goes for the Disco Bay area where Ilulissat is, that the towns are not that far from each other. So, and settlements, which means that you can go by boat, for example, from Ilulissat over to Qeqertarsuaq, which means the big island. It takes 2 hours by boat to get there. And of course, it all depends on weather, how much you can cover if you have short time. So that's always the challenge. I would always recommend to have some buffer time on each end of your stay to make sure you're back in the town you have to fly back from. Otherwise, well, that's also the charm about Greenland is that we're still so close to nature because it's still really rough, or can be, which means that if the weather is bad, we will not be flying. And I am totally good with that because we don't want to fly if the weather is bad. We don't want to crash the plane or anything. A lot of travelers can have a hard time coping with that. But I think you have to mentally prepare for that situation. I think you've tried it as well, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. So yeah, two quick things. One, the bad weather, when I was there in February, I've shared this story on here before, but I think my most harrowing travel experience in terms of like flight or whatever was getting from the Reykjavik domestic airport to Nuuk, because it was a prop plane taking off in a blizzard at 11:30 at night, and it was like the entire time, and it was for 3 hours. It just not you're just tense the entire time, and so that was not a ton of fun. But once you get there, you're right. I think the key is being flexible because the weather is unpredictable and flights get canceled all the time. And I think when we've planned travel for folks before, we typically, we never unless we have to for some reason, don't plan two different modes of transportation on the same day, certainly. And oftentimes we try to avoid it even back-to-back days, right?
Yeah.
Because you just, your flight might get canceled on Monday, so you have to fly on Tuesday. But if the boat was supposed to leave at a certain time, so you just plan for the boat on Wednesday regardless. And if you have an extra 24 hours in that stopover, great, no problem.
Just go with the flow and enjoy. And I'll say that local tour operators will always try to have they always have a plan B. So if you can't do the tour that you wanted to do on the day because the weather is bad, we'll try to schedule it for another day and maybe do some cultural stuff on the day that you were supposed to be out in the nature. So
exactly,
it all works out.
Yeah. So there's so much more we can get into in terms of the regions and the relationship with Denmark, and the fact that geographically Greenland is considered part of North America, but politically it's part of Europe because of its relationship largely with Denmark, and largest island in the world, and blah. So whoever's listening, if you have questions about that, you want to learn more about those types of things, again, please email us hello@ or travel at, or even Greenland at explorer-x.com. We're happy to answer any of those questions. But for now, I want to take what you just said and sort of transition that into more about the culture, more about the pioneering people, right? This idea of like being flexible, being adaptable, overcoming challenges, overcoming adversity. Where does that come from? And sort of how did this concept and the idea of the pioneering people, where did that come from?
Yeah, so of course, when you live in such small communities and you are very remote, like from everything, for example, during World War II, Greenland was there in the middle and kind of cut off from the rest of the world. And of course, that was early times, but it was still a colony at the time. You learn how to live off the nature. We've always done that, so there's nothing new in that, I'll say. But you have to have a good imagination. I mean, you have to solve the problems when they come right there, and people do that. So like things that you thought you couldn't use for anything can be very useful for something. And I think the nature has kind of shaped the people into who they are. Whether it is the Inuits that lived in Greenland for so long, I'll say today we're very mixed population, with of course a lot of Danish influence, as myself, like half Danish, half Greenlandic, which is very common.
Just to interrupt, what percentage of the people that live in Greenland are Inuit, just 100% versus a mix?
You can't really say that they are 100% Inuit, but there is about 7,000 Danes from Denmark living in Greenland.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, there's about 48,000 with Greenlandic heritage of some kind.
Sure, fair enough. I appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, there's a lot of discussion going on right now about, I think because of, I know it's because of Black Lives Matter, the whole discussion around that. The word Eskimo has been a discussion lately. And in Denmark, there is an ice cream called a giant Eskimo. And over the summer, that has been the huge topic in Greenland, because Eskimo is the white man's word for Inuit people, and it means people that eat raw meat.
Oh.
And as my friend says, but we do. We do eat raw meat. So why is that offensive? But a lot of people find it offensive. But the whole debate came up also around, there is this statue of Hans Egede, who was the one that colonized Greenland from Denmark. Or actually at the time, Norway and Denmark was one country. They had one king. So it was actually Norway, Denmark, but it ended up being Denmark. There's a statue of him in Nuuk, and people had sprayed red paint on it.
Interesting.
So I think for me, we can't deny where we come from. And I think we are such a mix. I think in comparison to other Arctic communities, that with Inuit, that Greenland is probably the country that has coped the best with, the combination or being colonized, kept the language, which is not the case for people in Alaska. Only a few people speak the local language, which is actually a similar language. So Inuits in Greenland and Canada, Alaska, they understand each other also in Arctic Russia. So I think in general, Greenland has been better off with having Denmark as the, I think Denmark is treating Greenland well.
What is it? What's your speculation as to why that is? Is it because Greenland is an island and it's more difficult to potentially get to you can't get there via land like you can to Alaska, or is it just a relationship with Denmark? What do you think?
I think it's because of the relationship with Denmark, because Danish is also a small language. Of course, Scandinavians understand each other, but whereas in Canada and Alaska, of course, it's English. And it's widely spoken all over the world, which is not the case for Danish, which is also part of the discussion today, because you can't speak Danish anywhere else than in Greenland and Denmark and the Faroe Islands. It's a small language, so it would have been more useful for people in Greenland to learn English, but we speak both languages in Greenland, so it's Danish and Greenlandic, and the papers are in both languages, and the news are in both languages. But it's a lot about identity and being proud. I think that people are looking back to the original roots of Inuit, and lots of Inuit tattoos, and there's a lot of people with Inuit tattoos. Even my aunt, she has facial tattoos, traditional facial tattoos, which is kind of new and a way to show that, because it has been difficult. I think especially for my parents' generation, they felt less worth as human beings than Danes. And if you look into the history, especially during the 50s, 60s, and 70s, even 80s, how Danes perceived Greenlanders as these nature people. I think if we had been in America, we had probably been the Indians locked up in a reserve.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Wow. There's so many questions. I could ask you 15 different questions right now. And we I want to also honor our time here. One thing that always struck me was, you mentioned the hardships and the innovation and the creativity that the natives, people of Greenland, had to sort of go through and live with. What struck me when I was there was that it's easy to see how that could have really hardened them and made them very cold, not just, pun intended, it's cold there, but just sort of shut off from other people. And yet the opposite seems to have happened, right? I feel like you meet them and they're just so excited to see you, and very warm and very giving, very caring, very willing to have a conversation with you. And so that was, one of my favorite parts about that is one of my experiences that I'll never forget was in Nuuk, in the middle of winter, wandering into a dive bar, right? And it's that scene from The Secret Life of Walter Mitty where he goes into the bar and the guy's singing karaoke and they've got the big shoe, glass of beer. It was that, to a T. And yet everyone there was native Greenlander, and they could not have been nicer and warmer, and they were trying to, communicate and speak English and asking questions. And it was a great experience. So I've always been touched by the warmth of the people there. But we've got a little bit of time left here. We've got a lot to get into. I wanted to mention kayaking, because I know kayaking is a really, really important part of the culture there. And we also want to get into dog sledding. And the importance of that. And I know you've got a really awesome project that you're working on and related to dog sledding. So what do you want to talk about? Where do you want to go with this in the next 10 minutes or so?
Yeah. So, first you mentioned the kayak, and the Greenlandic word is kayak. So actually the kayak word is from Inuit language, not only Greenland, but kayak is the word that the international community has adopted. And the other word is anorak, which is the traditional male upper clothing, right? And it comes in all forms, in fur and cotton and everything. And of course, kayaking in Greenland, it's been the kayak and the dog sled has been the most important part for transportation. Actually, also the umiak back then, which is the women's boat, because the men were in the kayaks and the women were in this bigger boat with their tents and like the summer camp and with the kids and everything. It's like a huge row boat. And the men, of course, use the kayak to hunt, especially seals. But the other very important thing was the sled dog. And dog sledding is like this, a very central part of our culture. Dog sledding, actually the dog itself is the oldest race in the world. And because we are an island, it hasn't been mixed with other races. So it's actually, we only have dogs north of the polar circle and in east. And there cannot be like pet dogs north of the polar circle and in East Greenland. So it's only south of there, they have pet dogs. And that means that this race is totally pure and it has adapted to the harsh environment, which means that it's a very strong and can cope with really low temperatures. And it's still a mean of transportation in Greenland, but it's decreasing rapidly because we don't need it in the same way as we used to. Because today there are other possibilities, but not only that, also because of climate change, because the ice is melting, which means that we do not always have sea ice. And the only place in Greenland where you use the backcountry is in Sisimiut, which is just around the Arctic Circle on the west coast. From Gangerlussuaq to Sisimiut, Gangerlussuaq is the place where you land when you fly from Copenhagen. And it's the only kind of artificial place in Greenland which is inland, and it's very close to the ice cap. So you can go and see the ice sheet. It's just a day tour to see the ice sheet. But it just means that this huge backcountry from Sisimiut, where you go with the dog sled, and they have open sea waters all year, whereas in the north they do not. So it's especially there, it's changing, but it's also changing because of modern lifestyle. We don't go hunting for, well, there's some full-time hunters, but most people just do it for the pleasure. And it's very expensive to keep dogs because of course you have to feed them all the time, even though you're only using them on the weekends in the winter. So we, together with a local tour operator, we came up with the idea of making a kennel, which is not the natural way to have dogs in Greenland, because you would usually have them, you would have like 10, 15 dogs, maybe more, puppies as well, that you use in front of your sled. And they would be right outside of your house. So whatever leftovers you have, you also give to the dogs. But now they are all situated in the outskirts of the towns because they're noisy. They howl like like a wolf. They don't bark. So so they go there to feed the dogs once a day.
Sure.
But our idea is to build a kennel to preserve the knowledge, but also to preserve the dog from extinction, which could be the case because we don't really need them anymore. And the idea is to build a visitor center where you can go and get information as locals as well as visitors. And of course, you can go dog sledding. And also, we want to do it like in the summer with wheels, which they do in Iceland and Scandinavia and other places, so that you can go all year round. Not that you can do like the longer trips, but it's just kind of get the feel for sitting behind the dogs and being dragged on. So we're trying to fundraise the whole project now. So there's no doubt that the kennel will be a fact. It's not that expensive to do that, and there will be a man hired to take care of that. But the expensive part is, of course, to build a visitor center, which has everything. Also because the health of the dogs is not that good. Because we only have one veterinarian in Ordering, and that person is in Ilulissat, so not anywhere close to Sisimiut or other places. So dogs die, and they don't know why. It's just like if it gets sick, you just have to shoot it because you can't treat it. So of course, that needs to be done something to keep the dog, and also the health of the dog needs to be better. And there's been this science project for 3 years with international scientists, and they came with 22 recommendations to how we can preserve the dog sledding culture. And I think 10 of the recommendations we deal with in this project.
Sure.
So it's quite interesting.
Where is the shelter going to be built? You probably said this and I missed it.
Oh, the visitor center and the kennel is going to be in Sisimiut.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they already got the permission to build in that area, and the mayor of the town is backing the project, and I think it's a very good idea. It will be the first of its kind in Greenland, and it is kind of controversial because people in Greenland will say, well, it's not the natural way to keep dogs, and this is not how we used to do it. But we're saying if we don't do it, then we might not have any dogs in 20 years. Right.
Wow. So what we do is after the webinar is over, Robin typically sends out an email following up with everyone with a link to the video and all that. What I'd like to do is include a link to the project. Does your project have a website that we can share with folks?
Not yet. I can share I shared some material.
The 22 tips. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So Robin, if we can attach that or put it in Dropbox and share a Dropbox link to that, I think that'd be great.
Okay. Yep, I'll include it.
Awesome. Luca, we're running up on time here. There's so much more to get into. I've got a laundry list of questions here related to climate change and so many different things, right? The impact on the remote settlements that you alluded to earlier. So we'll have to have you come back at some point and kind of dive into a conversation about that, and I feel like that could be another hour just in and of itself. So for now, I'm gonna hand it over to Robin. She's got some rapid fire questions for you. But before I do that, I have one last question for you. We call this wisdom and wanderlust. You've talked about your sense of wanderlust and the wanderlust that is sort of inherent in the Greenlandic spirit and culture. What words of wisdom would you share with those that are listening to this?
So I thought I wanted to quote a polar explorer, which is a person that we admire very much in Greenland. He is Danish, but he totally adopted the Greenlandic culture and spoke Greenlandic. Let's see if I can find the exact words, which I have somewhere here. It's the polar explorer called Knud Rasmussen. He said, "Give me winter and dogs, you can keep the rest." He was very much into dog sledding. And what I want to say with that is that I think that most people travel in June, July, and August, but I think you should travel in September or winter. Like, the reason why I like to travel end of August into September is because the mosquitoes are gone and they can be quite annoying.
Yes.
But also the winter is just, Greenland turns into this huge playground where you can dog sled and snowmobile and ski and, you know, yeah.
Awesome.
So I think that's my suggestion for you guys.
I love
That's
it.
what I do.
I always love ending on a good quote, you know me. So cool. Luca, thank you. Robin, rapid fire.
Yeah, that sounds great. Thanks, you guys. And I mean, I would love to go there in the winter. I love winter recreation. So I feel like that sounds amazing. So I have a few rapid fire questions that I like to ask everyone at the end. And these are just questions that, you know, the first thing that comes to mind is what we'd like you to answer. So the first question is, if you could go anywhere in the world right now, where would you go? Yes.
I would go to Greenland. I haven't been there since October because of COVID-19, and I miss it so much.
I had a feeling you'd say that. Do you have a favorite or most memorable local meal from Greenland?
Yes. My favorite meal, and this is very traditional in Greenland, is that you catch fresh cod, which is really easy. You just put out and you get in lots of cod, and you put it in a pot with seawater, and you just boil it on a bonfire, and then you pour it on a stone, and then you eat it directly from the stone or the rock. It's amazing. It's it gets this flavor of smoke to it, but still this very fresh cod that you just caught. It's the most amazing. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, it sounds amazing. What is one essential item that you always bring with you when you travel?
Water bottle. In Greenland, you can drink the water from anywhere, but I bring my bottle everywhere I go.
Yeah. Let's see. Okay, I have two more. If you were to summarize Greenland in a short word or phrase, what would that be?
Whoa. Lots of contrasts. I would say contrasts. Yeah.
I love that. And last but not least, circling back to our question of the day, who is somebody that you've met while you've been traveling that has made a lasting impact on you?
Well, there is only one person that really made a lasting impact, and that's my husband. Because I met him when I was traveling.
That is lasting.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Luca.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Luca. Thanks, Robin. Luca, this was awesome. Like I said, truly, we'll have to have you back. There's so many more things that we can get into that we want to talk about. So we'll find a time to bring you back, and we can dive into much more. And I can't impress upon those that are listening to this enough that when the world permits, when travel permits, and also being mindful of not wanting to, promote over tourism, Greenland's a spot that I would absolutely move to the top of your list of destinations to visit because of the culture, because of the people, because of the nature, because of all the things that we've talked about here. Just if you're interested, if you're intrigued, again, please reach out to us. Greenland@explorer-x.com, hello@travel@ all of that. Reach out to us. We'd love to talk to you about all of our destinations. We'd love to talk to you about Greenland. And we hope that you'll reach out and start a conversation with us and just begin to learn more about why we are so passionate about Greenland as a destination. So we're gonna get going here. Quick reminder: next week we have our team in Peru. We've got a really, really special Pachamama ceremony led by a local shaman that we're going to be participating in. So that'll be at 9 a.m. next Wednesday. And we'll have a link so you can register on or through Instagram and Facebook and on our website as well. Again, questions for Luca or our team about Greenland can be greenland@travel@ or hello@explorer-x.com. Visit our website, explorer-x.com, and follow us on social media @GoExploreX. And last thing, if you're interested in membership and learning more about our new membership program, which is really robust, really special, lots of great ways for you to engage with our team in unique ways, check it out. It's explorerx.com/join. But again, for today, Luca, thank you so much. It's been a blast, and we really appreciate it. We can't wait to talk to you soon. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you.